Hello there! Welcome to Skunk Key Productions. I'm Crown Kokon, and let's get into the video. Today's video we're going to be continuing with our Disney series, and today's video we're going to be looking at none other than the many adventures of Winnie the Pooh from 1977. So if you like what you've seen already, don't forget obviously hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell button so you stay notified, and also don't forget to check out our many other videos from this playlist. You will not be disappointed, and of course we have many more videos to come. So definitely obviously subscribe so that you stay tuned. So for those of you who have seen our videos before, you'll know the drill by now. But for those of you who are new, allow us to elaborate. So we have it split into 6 different parts. So we have the story of the story of the creator, the story of the studio, the themes and history, the legacy, and any notable lines and notable effects within the film. So without further ado, we're going to dive straight now into the plot of Winnie the Pooh. So our story starts with the narration by Bagheera, as we dive into an introduction into the 100-acre wood and its many characters, and most of all, Winnie the Pooh, with the theme song of the same name. So Pooh is thinking really hard about what he wants, before he remembers that it's honey, his favourite food. So he climbs up a tree to get more of it, but as he's climbing, he falls down. So he goes to ask Christopher Robin for help, who is busy helping out the other animals. So Pooh Bear asks Christopher for a balloon to fly up there, before getting all dirty to fool the bees into thinking that he's just a rain cloud. But the bees obviously clock on and proceed to sting him. So Pooh then goes to Rabbit's house for lunch, but ends up eating all his honey, and as a result, he ends up getting stuck. So Owl goes to get Gopher to free Winnie, but Gopher spends far too long talking, so in the end Christopher Robin ends up having to rescue Winnie the Pooh by waiting for him to get Finn again, which takes days and days and days, but eventually they manage to pull him out. Next, it's a blustery day, and it also happens to be a Wednesday. So Piglet gets blown about all the way to Owl's house, which in turn ends up getting blown down by the wind. But later that night, Pooh ends up hearing a strange noise outside, and when he opens the door, in leaps Tigger, who ends up eating some honey and warns Pooh about the heffalumps and woozles, which Pooh later ends up having a nightmare about. So the next day, there ended up being so much rain that everyone got flooded. So they all head to Christopher Robin's house, where the stragglers go to rescue Pooh and Piglet. And for some reason, Pooh ends up getting credit for rescuing Piglet, even though this doesn't really make any sense. But anyway, so what ends up happening then is that Eeyore ends up taking them all to a brand new house for Owl, but he actually ends up taking them to Piglet's house. So for some reason in this, Piglet is just completely fine with, Eeyore giving Owl his house, and, he's a bit of a victim in this. But nicely enough, Winnie the Pooh offers for him to stay at his house. So this is where they end up having a big celebration, and the two of them end up being called heroes, even though neither of them necessarily did anything else that heroic here. But anyway, so next we end up focusing on Tigger, who is being a bit of a bouncing menace. So what they end up doing then is they all gang up on him. But this plot ends up backfiring as they end up getting lost in the mist. So Rabbit is the one leading them, but obviously he's doing a terrible job of it. So what Pooh suggests is that instead of trying to find home, they should find the sandpit, which they keep stumbling over. But Rabbit, obviously in his arrogance, he says no, and he ends up getting himself lost, while Pooh follows his tummy and ends up finding his way out of the mist. This is where they end up bumping into Tigger again, and so Tigger ends up being the one having to rescue Rabbit from the mist. And of course, Rabbit is not very happy with this. So later in the year, it's snowing, and Tigger and Roo end up bouncing away all straight up a tree. And this is where they end up getting stuck. So now Rabbit, he's just a proper op in this, I don't understand what his problem is with Tigger. But what he does while Tigger's up there is he basically makes him promise that if he comes down, he's never going to bounce again. So then what ends up happening is obviously, Tigger's scared, he makes this promise. When he comes down, he's really heartbroken because he's never going to be able to jump, not even a little bit. So of course, everyone else ends up pressuring Rabbit, and of course, eventually he ends up relinquishing, and they all end up bouncing and being very happy. So now, unfortunately, the story has come to an end, and Christopher Robin, he must grow up and he must go to school, which means that he has to leave the 100-acre wood forever. But of course, even though he has to leave, Winnie the Pooh will still be waiting for him forever. And on that very beautiful note, the film ends happily ever after. So obviously that covers the story of the story, but now we have to cover the story of the creative process that went into the making of the film. So the story of Winnie the Pooh, of course, comes from A. Milne, who is an English author. But while the first allusion of it came from the book When We Were Young, which came out in 1924, Winnie the Pooh wasn't actually called Winnie the Pooh in that. He was actually referred to as Edward Bear. So it wasn't until 1926 when you're having a book with the same title of Winnie the Pooh, and this is where Winnie the Pooh was born. So Winnie the Pooh is actually named after A. Milne's son, and this was actually Christopher Robin Milne, and this was one of his toy teddy bears. So teddy bears by this time had become very popularized as a result of President Teddy Roosevelt, because he was big into hunting, and there's a whole story with regard to that. Definitely go and check out our video on that for the main channel. So if you're not subscribed to both channels, definitely do that now. But there's a thing where by this time, teddy bears had become very popular toys for children to have. And also many of the other characters within this, they also were some of the toys which Christopher Robin had. So the name Winnie was named after a famous bear at London Zoo, while Pooh was a friend's pet swan. So that's where the name of Winnie the Pooh ended up being merged together. So Milne ended up developing the characters further, and of course, like we said, they were based on Christopher Robin's toys. And he had the story set in Ashdown Forest in East Sussex from the 500-acre wood, which obviously he ended up changing to being a 100-acre wood to be a bit more magical. So Walt Disney first learned of the story from his daughter Diane, who loved the story so much and laughed so much that he just was absolutely curious, and so he was like, right, I need to make a film about this. So as early as 1938, he had actually made plans that he was going to make a film of this. However, it took so long to get the rights for the film, so obviously he tried in 1938, it wasn't until 1961 that he ended up acquiring the rights for the actual story. And in 1964, this is where he wanted to make a short film of this, but in the end he ended up deciding that it would just be a featurette within a live action film. So in 1966, this is where you're having the first featurette, and this was Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. Then in 1968, you're having Winnie the Pooh and the Blustery Day. And then finally in 1974, you're having Winnie the Pooh and Tigger 2. And in each of these stories, what Walt Disney's team did is they actually Americanized the characters and actually added a few things in. So for instance, the character of the gopher, he was never actually in any of the originals. And actually they make a joke at one point, saying, oh, well, he's not even in the actual book. And also as well, they added a lot more humor into it. And all of this came under the directorship of Wolfgang Reifferman. So we've covered him in many other videos as well. And actually I may do a completely separate video just focusing on him and his career. So that covers the story of the creative process that went into the making of the film. But now we have to talk about the story of the studio. So in 1977, it was decided that these three featurettes were going to be merged together into one feature-length film. And they were going to have a few filler scenes to basically bridge the stories together and to make it one whole film. So talk about the casting for the story. So the character of Christopher Robin was actually voiced by 3 different voice actors across the 3 different featurettes. So you had Bruce Reifferman, who is also the voice of Mowgli, so he's the son of Wolfgang Reifferman, which we've covered in other videos. But on top of that, you also had John Walmsley, and you had the voice of Timothy Turner, and these 3 together became the voice of Christopher Robin within this film. Next, you're having Sterling Holloway, who is the voice of Winnie the Pooh. And actually, we've covered him at great length throughout this whole series, so definitely go and check out other videos where we speak about him. But this actually was the very last Disney film where he was the voice character for. So, absolute end of the era, really brilliant guy and stuff, right? So yeah, we really have to give him credit for this, that he did this voice and all the other voices that he did absolutely brilliantly. So it really was the end of an era. Another person that this is the end of the era for was Barbara Luddy, and she is the voice of Kanga in this. So once again, this is also her final Disney film. Next you had John Fiedler, and he is the voice of Piglet. So we covered him in our last video where we spoke about Robin Hood. Next you have Ralph Wright, and he is the voice of Eeyore. So he was actually just a writer in several different Disney films. So this actually was one of the first roles where he was actually the voice actor for. Next you had Clint Howard, who's the voice of Roo. So we covered him more in our video about the Jungle Book, but also to let you know that he was in The Grinch That Stole Christmas. Next you have Paul Winchler, who's the voice of Tigger, but also of course he appears in Aristocats as well, as we've said. And then also you had Julius Matthews, who appears in 101 Dalmatians, but more famously he is the voice of Archimedes in The Sword and the Stone, and in this he is the voice of Rabbit. Next you have Hal Smith, who's the voice of Owl, and he appears as quite a minor character within the Jungle Book. And you also had Howard Morris, who is the voice of the Gopher. And then finally we have to talk about a director who I said at the beginning was Bagheera. Yes, that is the voice of Sebastian Coburn. So he appears in The Sword and Stone, and of course he appears in the Jungle Book. So that covers the story of the studio, but now we have to talk about the themes and the history. So in terms of the themes for this, we've already kind of covered with regard to Teddy Roosevelt and obviously the influence that had on children's toys at the turn of the last century. But also we have to say something which is with regard to the different characters. And actually a book which was absolutely life-changing for me was The Tao of Pooh. So this came out in 1982 and this was written by Benjamin Hoff. But within this story, it's basically kind of saying that in terms of Taoism, which is obviously, you know, yin and yang, it's also about like balance and stuff, right? It's basically saying that the way we ought to live our life isn't to be like Piglet, where we're all anxious all the time, isn't to be like Tigger, where we just bounce around all the time, isn't to be like Rabbit or like Owl, where we're just too smart, or like think that we're too smart rather, and actually end up making a whole lot of mistakes and are very prideful and arrogant. Instead, we ought to be more like Winnie the Pooh, where we go through life and things just work out. If it's raining today, we'll figure it out. If it's sunny today, we'll figure it out. How are we going to get our next meal? We'll figure it out. How are we going to get out of the mist? We'll figure it out. So in life, before, when I read this book when I was like 22, 23, right, I used to be very kind of worried about things. I used to be very focused on, oh, this and that, etc. And then having this book here, right, reading this book was really life-changing for me, because it made me realise basically you have to find the path of least resistance. Just like the river, if you come across a rock, go over the rock, go around the rock, don't try and go through the rock. So that's something which was very, very influential, and deep within the psychology of Winnie the Pooh, that's kind of a message to have here, which is actually be like Pooh Bear, right? He's the hero of the story. Be chilled out like him. Don't worry about things. Don't think you're too clever. Don't, you know, and also, of course, don't be like Eeyore, where you're just miserable, depressed and pessimistic all the time. Just be a happy optimist, right? And actually that's why my tattoo, the only tattoo that I have and that I'm likely to get, is yin and yang, and that's as the influence of me reading that book. So just a little bit trivial with regard to that. So that covers the themes and the history, and now we have to talk about the legacy of the film. So what's annoying about this one is that, unlike many of the other films, it was difficult for me to find out what the budget was for it, and also to find out what the box office was for it. The reason being is because these things here were originally obviously as featurettes, so the whole paperwork behind them, etc., was never really like factored in. And because all of them were released separately over 3 like different years and 3 different occasions, the only figure I could find was with regard to the box office in the US and Canada for the first featurette. So this is A Winnie the Pooh and the Honey Tree. So that one there, it had a box office of $6.2 million in the US and Canada. However, I wasn't able to find out the budget for it, and I wasn't able to find out what the international box office was, and I wasn't able to find out the box office for any other film. So apologies for that. If I find it while I'm doing more research and stuff, I'll have it on the screen now. But if you don't see it, it's because I can't find it. If you can find it, don't forget obviously to put it in the comment section, because that will help out the video, and also it will help me out just so peace of mind. But of course, the legacy of it is far beyond what can be actually put in monetary terms. So, of course, everyone knows about Winnie the Pooh. It's very, very distinctive. And actually, Winnie the Pooh is banned in several countries. And the reason being is, for instance, with China, he is banned because he has a striking resemblance to Premier Xi Jinping. So, as a result of that, people in China, pointed that out. And because he's so triggered, he banned Winnie the Pooh outright within the country. So just a little bit of trivia with regard to that, and that's just quite a funny kind of thing that innocent child's story ends up being banned because the leader has a striking resemblance to Winnie the Pooh. So anyway, that kind of covers the legacy of it. And now finally we have to talk about the notable lines and notable effects. So in terms of the notable effects, one thing that you could say is with regard to the constant breaking of the fourth wall. So this is where there's either where a character is either talking to the audience, or where the character within the thing is making it clear that you're within a story and stuff. So the constant kind of like talking to the narrator, and also the narrator talking back to the characters, that is a very interesting technique, and also visually that actually manifests itself in quite interesting ways at different parts from the story. That's almost like a kind of like ex machina kind of thing, especially with the Tigger 2 story. There's definitely a lot of like ex machina within there where the narrator helps out the situation. But also as well, we have to say with regard to notable lines, there's so many here. I'm just gonna, it's gonna be a headache because there's gonna be so many. So I'm gonna try and cut down the number that I show, but at the same time, this film is absolutely hilarious. I think this is one of the best Disney films for a long shot, and it kind of gets swept under the carpet. I almost forgot to do it because, like I said in the last video, I said I was gonna do about The Searchers, but this film actually came out slightly before it, right? Early in the same year of 1977. So even I almost end up skipping over it. But watching it again, I was like, wow, that's absolutely brilliant. But you gotta have this.
And the only reason for being a bee is to make honey. And the only reason for making honey is so I can eat it.
And you have this.
Be going now. Goodbye, rabbit.
Well, goodbye. If you're sure you won't have any more.
Is there any more?
No, there isn't.
I thought not.
And you have this.
There. A hunting trophy. I know just the thing. Oh, Pooh! You mess up my moose.
And you have this.
Hello, I'm Tigger.
You said that.
Oh, well, did I say I was hungry?
I don't think so.
Well, then I'll say it. I'm hungry.
And you have this.
Oh dear, just look at my beautiful garden.
Yuck, messy, isn't it?
Messy, it's ruined.
And you have this.
Could you say it again, please, Rabbit?
Well, where should I start from?
Well, from the moment the fluff got in my ear.
Well, when was that?
I don't know. I couldn't hear properly.
And also, of course, finally, you have this.
How do you do just nothing?
Well, it's when grown-ups ask, what are you going to do? And you say nothing. And then you go out and do it.
I like that. Let's do it all the time.
So as you can see, it's an absolutely brilliant film. If you haven't seen it already, I don't know where you've been. And of course, like we always say, spoiler alert. I mean, the film came out in 1977. Most of you guys probably aren't even alive like when that film came out. So that's your fault if you haven't seen it already. But highly recommend that you go and watch our film. And also don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit the bell button so you stay notified. And also don't forget to check out the next video, which is, I promise you, going to be The Searchers from 1977. So, with all that being said, have a great day and bye.